Have you wondered what soft power means in today's world? When people talk about China's rise, they usually reach for the same images. Its factories, container ships, semiconductors, or even the trade war. China in that story makes things cheaply, and someone else decides what they mean. But the story is starting to fracture, because lately, China's most successful exports haven't been their machines or their hardware. They've been toys clipped to your handbags, retail stores that feel more like art galleries, and video games that feel less like entertainment and more like alternate realities. A Chinese designer doll sells out in minutes, a Chinese game wins one of the biggest awards in global gaming, and suddenly, people who never cared where these things came from are starting to buy Chinese brands. Not because they're just cheap, but because they want them. And it doesn't fit this old narrative. And when the story stops fitting, it's usually because something deeper has already changed. Today, China's display of power is not just in their military parades. Soft power doesn't arrive with speeches or slogans. It arrives quietly through objects people choose to keep close. In 2027, PopMart shares hit record highs after CEO announced a new version of a character. They call it Lababu. At the same time, social media filled with unboxing videos, not ads but rituals. People filming themselves opening these blind boxes, reacting, trading, and collecting. From everyday buyers to celebrities like Lisa from Blackpink, PopMart didn't start as a global powerhouse. It opened a single store in Beijing about a decade ago. Today, it operates across the US, not just New York or Los Angeles, but weird places like Ohio. That matters because it tells you that this isn't some niche culture anymore. Since 2024, PopMart's annual revenue has more than tripled. Overall sales jumped as much as 250%. What's important isn't just the growth, it's what they're selling. Labubu isn't functional. It doesn't solve a problem, but it solves an emotional need. For decades, China exported low-value goods where soft power never really had any room to grow. But as you move up the value chain, influence becomes a natural byproduct. You stop exporting objects and you start exporting tastes. Labubu didn't spread alone, it moved through platforms like TikTok. TikTok now sits aside YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook as one of the most influential platforms in the world. It has over a billion users globally, including more than 170 million in the US alone. And for many young Americans, TikTok wasn't just entertainment. It was their first sustained interaction with a Chinese company. Not a political idea, it's just an app. This matters because Chinese consumer economy grew mobile first. Payments, shopping, and discovery all integrated into your daily life far earlier than in the West. In US, it's about 30% of retail payments made by the phone. Compare that to China, where it's almost 90% of all retail payments are made by their mobile phone. Chinese companies spent years refining these systems at home under intense competition, and now they're exporting their playbook. Luckin Coffee is a great example. In 2023, it surpassed Starbucks in China by pure revenue. By late 2024, it had 3 times as many stores as Starbucks. Its model is simple: app-only ordering, lower staff costs, and faster turnover. And now, it's expanding into the US, opening its first store in New York. They add things like a pumpkin spice latte to adapt to the local culture. This is what Chinese expansion looks like. It's always about trying new things at scale because they have the ability to experiment at all times. First, they try it in the East, and when they know it works, they roll it out quickly. And when you start to zoom out, you will see the same pattern happening in many different industries. China's outward push isn't just about ambition, it's a necessity. At home in China, companies face factory deflation and relentless competition. In a way, it's like the Hunger Games here in China. Prices are under pressure, the margins for companies are thin, and to survive, they have to go overseas, where consumers are willing to pay more and their profits can be higher. Take Brazil for an example. Like China, it has a growing urban center, a rising middle class, and a young population that is very comfortable with digital mobile-first tools. Chinese retail apps like Temu and Shein are already very popular down there. Meituan plans to invest $1 billion over 5 years to launch its food delivery business in Brazil. That more coincides with their president Lula's visit to Beijing, where they have now new agreements signed that allows Chinese investment in infrastructure and logistics in Brazil. The mix of this corporate expansion and government backing isn't accidental. Beijing wants its companies to build global footprints, not just for their revenue, but for the political power. But the path itself isn't always very smooth. You have tariffs, investigations, and data scrutiny. Companies like Huawei have already been blocked entirely. TikTok faced repeated threats, even as political rhetoric softened. And yet the leaders now are talking about saving TikTok, telling you it's something important. These brands are no longer abstract. They're deeply embedded into your life. So, what does soft power really mean? For most of these users, TikTok isn't a Chinese app, Temu isn't a geopolitical statement, and Lababu, it's not a cultural ambassador. These are just normal things, and that's what soft power really is. It's not something loud or identifiable, but something that blends into your daily life. Research is now showing that young Americans view China more favorably than their older generations, not because of policy, but because of familiarity with the products and the culture. At the same time, challenges remain. And this means that the long-term success of Chinese brands won't be decided by politics alone. It'll depend on whether they can build these durable businesses that people will choose time and time again without really even considering where they're coming from. It shows up in small objects, everyday habits, and emotional choices. For investors, the important signals aren't just that single brands or apps are able to travel across into the US. It's direction of travel. China is no longer competing only on cost and scale. It's increasingly competing on taste, habits, and emotional attachments. These are the hardest parts of businesses to displace once they are deeply embedded in the culture. So, for us looking at these companies, what it matters to us is that not every Chinese brand will succeed. Retention matters, trust matters, and regulations definitely matters. Some of these companies will turn out to be cyclical. Just like PopMart, they might crash 50% next week. The investor's lesson isn't to choose what's popular, it's to watch where the habits are forming, especially among the youngest of users. So, if you have a son or a daughter, pay attention to what they're using, the products that they love. Why is it that they fall to these brands? At the end of the day, we are all investors. All we have to do is look at the products that capture our attention. Why is it that these products were able to convince us to continue using? How did they create this following? That's exactly what we're looking for. If you take away one thing from this episode, I hope it's this. Soft power is the early sign. It shows you where the habits are forming, where tastes, attention are formed before the numbers really catch up. If you want to find the next great idea, don't follow headlines or policies. Follow what young people are actually choosing quietly to live in their everyday life. That's how it looks like from where I'm standing. Let me know what you're seeing from your side.